Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum's Movie Night virtual discussion. My name is Molly Snow. I'm on the education team filling in for Eric tonight. And I just want to give a quick shout out and thank you to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Foundation and for their support and for the support of the Finley family in memory of Pat Finley. So thank you to them for making all of our virtual events possible. As you all know, tonight's discussion is the 2016 film Hacksaw Ridge, and Eric gave me a little bit of background information, so let me just share that quick. So the director was Mel Gibson, and it stars Andrew Garfield as the lead, Sam Worthington, Teresa Palmer, Hugo Weaving, and Vince Vaughn. The box office, they made $180 million, which is pretty good. When the budget was only $40 million. They were nominated for 6 Academy Awards, but won 2, Best Film Editing and Best Sound Mixing, which I thought was interesting. And hopefully everyone got the questions from either Eric or I. Let's see. All right, let's just jump into it with the first question, Life in Lynchburg. Where does Desmond get his wild side from, and what was the turning point for him to change that?
Well, I thought he got his wild side from just being a brother. I mean, 2 kids, constantly at each other. And so I think that just played out until he brains his brother with a brick.
Yeah.
At which point, after the lecture from his mother, it becomes it becomes clear to him why he can't be as wild as he used to be.
I think it was part of their family and their personality, because even when they were hiking and on that ridge, the people who walked up kind of made a comment as to, oh, those are the so-and-so boys. So they were known for being wild.
So it's also possible that some of it might have come indirectly from seeing their father, who was often out of control. And so they probably didn't see anything particularly wrong with, being really, in the sense, wild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it goes back to what you were saying, Chris, about being a boy, and right, there's no responsibilities they have to worry about. They're just running through the woods, and they don't care if they get too close or because they don't know.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like you see a little kid, a young boy, walking along. He sees a stick on the street, picks it up, and starts hitting things with, hitting a tree, hitting a sidewalk, whatever. I don't know what it is about us guys, but we just kind of, have this urge to, hit things every once in a while.
Nice. Well, I think with guys, we're all just kind of born with the wild side, I would say, and we have to unleash it in some way.
Well, and also you can see it in, again, as his father who lashed out by hitting.
What was the second part of your question, Molly?
Yeah, what was the turning point in his life that changed this?
I would say when he took the brick and hit his brother. I think that was the major turning point for him. And I also think it shows in the poster with all the commandments, and when it says "Thou shalt not murder," it's probably when he saw that too. That was okay, I almost killed my brother, and it's going against what God is saying. And so from that point on, I think at that point, and then maybe later in life, he decided that he wasn't going to do that. And I think also when he put the gun to his dad. Yeah, that was another turning point for him, as well as pointing the gun to his father.
I think up until the time that he hit his brother with a brick, he really never thought about the consequences of being wild. And it was, the consequence didn't really hit him literally until he hit his brother and saw his brother literally almost die.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely traumatizing, and like you can't undo that, right? You can't. He probably thought like that, this is so serious, and I can't do that, right? Like you said about the commandments too. Okay. Next question was, discuss Desmond's parents' reaction to seeing his brother Harold in his military uniform at the dinner table.
We saw in his mother fear, well, both his mother and father fear, and his father certainly had anger. And I think it was mainly because of the fact that, like, it was such a traumatic experience for him that he doesn't want his sons to go through the same
or bury
pain.
his sons as well.
That scene was kind of reminiscent to me, because I remember when I told my parents that I was going to enlist, my mother had that same kind of look in her face. My dad was I didn't know it at the time, but he was suffering from PTSD from World War II. But he didn't, his reaction was pretty neutral. I remember we had a conversation about, before I went to college, about whether because I was kind of ambivalent about going to college. And even though he was a high school teacher, my mother was a college teacher, he said it was kind of up to me. I had to find my own decision. And I think, and that was his reaction when I was in the Army. So when I decided to go in the Army, but I think he could have had a similar reaction to Hugo Weaving's. It's just that he had it more under control, or so I thought at that time. But that was a familiar reaction to me.
I think with the times, it's was expected, but at the same time, I think they kind of felt insulated within the way that they were raising their children and their way of life and everything. So I think that they were shocked that, like, they were just, oh gosh, here it goes.
I also think it could have been like a sense of betrayal on their part too. Like they felt betrayed by his decision to enlist and not really discuss it with them. Or then again, I think the brother might have feared discussing because he knew what the response would be.
I think another part of it might have been the religion aspect, because they were Seventh-day Adventists, which were, if not exactly pacifists, were pretty darn close. Mm-hmm. And so having two sons literally decide they were going to go into the military would have really kind of shaken them, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I also thought his mom, she kind of talked to Desmond later about how his dad changed. And I think she feared that her sons would change then too.
Well, we've seen a lot of movies with that kind of dimension to it, with the post-traumatic PTSD.
So do you think there's a wartime distinction between saving and taking lives? Is that valid? I thought this was hard to answer personally.
This is a very difficult question to answer because, obviously taking lives is not something we think of that something that we want to pursue or anything. But in a time of war, it's almost like it's mandatory, I guess. I don't think that's the right word, but it's something that expected, yeah.
Well, if like you said, if expected, if you don't stand up for yourself, then what's going to become of your community, your families, your way of life, everything? So you say expected, yes, but it's, I don't know, it puts us into a corner. It doesn't give you much choice to either just be taken over or fight for your values and what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that that was a good, he's the way they, I didn't care for the movie particularly. I had seen it before and I didn't know I'd seen it before, but I don't know, I didn't care for the feel of the movie or something, but that I understood the message and the story, and I think that there was a place for him to be a part of the team, I guess, that I don't know, is a team, but to make a difference and be a part. And I think that you don't always have to, and the military is like that. You have the administrative people, you have the mechanics, there's a whole team of people. Is not, the harsh part is being on a front line or in the midst of a battle, but it takes a team of people with all of the parts to be successful.
I thought the characters thought that there was a distinction. And you kind of get that when you see that most of the characters thought that the point of war was to kill. And Desmond was the one who thought part of the war was to save as many lives as possible. And I think that particularly came out in that scene where they've all got their rifles and they're all down there, and Vince Vaughn is lecturing them about how Desmond, they shouldn't trust him because he won't carry a weapon into battle. So I think that I think Desmond had the better, in a sense, the better view of it, that, yeah, there's going to be a lot of killing, but there also has to be an aspect of saving the lives of as many people as possible, to minimize the killing as much as possible.
Right. Yeah. And I think he said he's not a conscientious objector. He's a conscientious cooperator. That's him.
Right. Yeah.
He's trying to cooperate, like you're saying.
You could really see how vehement the colonel got when Desmond refused to take the weapon, even when it was almost forced on him by the sergeant who was there, and the court martialing of the whole thing. It was. I think that I thought in regard to that question, there was definitely a distinction in the movie among the characters.
That's a good point. Okay, we'll move on to basic training, that part. What were the difficulties of Desmond's role of being a conscientious objector?
I think kind of like what Chris had said was, 99% of the people that go into the military are, going with a mindset to kill. And so being the conscientious objector of the military, it's difficult because, as we see, he's faced with so much pressure of like, why don't you just shoot the gun? Why don't you just go in and, not exactly take someone's life, but like, be prepared to face that reality that you will have to take a life. And because during that time, like, America was very much patriotic. They were very much, I wouldn't really say in favor of the war, but it was more of like considered the right thing to do at that time.
And when you have all of your teammates willing to shoot and you're the only one not, who's going to trust him to back them up?
I agree. I think part of it was a very limited notion about what loyalty is, about what trust is, and about how you determine that loyalty and whether that trust exists. And that comes out later again. I think when I think it was Vince Vaughn, character says that he was so wrong about Desmond,
I was thinking, I don't know your name. It says David Weinberg. What is your name? The young lady.
Selena.
Oh, Selena, yeah.
Selena. When Selena said, yeah, how do you trust that person? When he was in that hole with the guy who was the tough guy in the beginning, who kind of slapped him upside the head, and then he said, well, are we going to take turns? You know, you need to get some shut eye. And I was thinking, wow, how are they going to take turns? Because how's he going to cover? So yeah, that was a good point.
Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about Desmond's father, his influence on him throughout the film. We'll start with the negative aspects or the negative influence.
The negative influence.
I want to say the anger that Desmond's father had, also kind of transferred onto Desmond, because he did have a whole lot of anger that he bottled up inside. But at that turning point, when he pointed the gun to his dad, was when everything just kind of went away.
I watched this on the Blu-ray version, Blu-ray disc, and on that disc they have like the extras that they often put on those. This one had a really interesting one, which was an hour-long presentation on the making of the movie. And one of the points that I think that one of the directors made was that the negative aspects of Desmond's father were what influenced him to be a healer, because he could not heal his father. He knew he couldn't heal his father, but if he had a chance to heal others, that he would do that, which is why he wanted to become a medic, which is why he worked so hard at it on the battlefield. I thought that was an interesting take on his father's influence, because you see the anger and so on, and you think, how could that be a helpful influence? And that I think that director's take on it was right. That was probably the way it was.
That makes a lot more sense now. Any positive influence?
Well, I mean, he probably, even though the war had a negative effect on his father with the PTSD and his alcoholism and everything, I think just the fact that his father served was a positive influence. You know, like it was a thing that's considered heroic, and that's considered something of value and valor to do. And so that influenced Desmond to, Desmond and Hal to enlist, because at the time, when World War I happened, so his father enlisted. So then when another war comes up, then the brothers are now thinking that they have to enlist as well, because it's the right thing to do during such a crucial time.
Right.
That part where well, now I lost my whole train of thought. It just dropped out.
It'll come back.
Can you say the question again, Molly?
Yeah. What was discuss Desmond's father's influence on him, both negative and positive?
Positive was his father. He had been into, I don't know the military word for it, but they said that he had been into battles. What is that, Chris? They noticed his uniform and said,
well, they noticed what battle he'd been in.
Right, and they said you were in two.
Yeah.
2 fronts. So he was very recognized and honored and determined when he was in the military, and that must have been part of his personality. And then look how he pulled out all the strings to go and talk to the higher up and get the letter written and make sure it got there. So that determination that was in his father, whether it was muted by his alcoholism, came through in Desmond as well.
Right. Yeah. I would say it did show he cared a little bit, deep behind the anger. Like he always cared about his kids. So, all right.
One of the
go ahead.
difficulties I had with this movie was that I thought that a lot of the characters were too one-dimensional. I mean, I didn't think they were three-dimensional enough. It's almost like they were, 2.5 dimensional, something like that. But the one sense that did come through was to me, was the dedication of his parents to the children. And I think that was a huge influence on him as his determination to carry through on what it meant to be a medic instead of a rifle-bearing soldier.
Right. Yeah. And I think as we go on through the film, he sees them as, each other's brothers, just like his father had a group of people, right? And makes a strong bond then. The last question then on basic training is, does Dorothy's pleas to meet the company commander halfway, does that seem unreasonable for her to do that?
I guess that's based on like whose viewpoint you see it from. From Dorothy's, she's not, even though she's going to marry Desmond, she doesn't exactly fully understand where he's coming from. And so, she's, just wanting him to get out, wanting them to get married, and thinking that, if you just do this one thing, then we'll be able to start our lives together. But with Desmond, for him, it's going against what he believes in.
And what he promised himself.
And what he promised himself and promised to God as well. And so if to him it's unreasonable for his soon-to-be wife to, say something like that and just say, meet them halfway, because it just kind of he loses his place in the world if he does that.
It seems for him halfway would be total capitulation.
Yep.
Which would be unacceptable.
Yeah, he didn't want to be involved with that weapon of destruction at all. Mm-hmm. And she was looking at it like, well, as long as you're not killing anybody, if you just hold it or you just, shoot the targets and get through this thing, then you check the box and then we can be okay with this. But he did not want to be connected at all with that.
I'm not sure what halfway would have meant from the other side, from his commander's side.
That's a good point.
It was either all or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even know how you do a halfway thing in that situation.
Another thing that I kind of wondered was, did Desmond ever tell Dorothy why he never wanted to hold a gun again? Because that never got mentioned. And I mean, on a girl's perspective, we just want, our husbands to be safe, come out, come home. But then again, if you also knew the truth behind why, then we could be a lot more full-heartedly supportive of your husband or of your soon-to-be husband, as opposed to, I just want you to get out, get married.
Selena, that was a part that was kind of frustrating to me in the beginning, is when he kept coming up against these different men during basic training, and there was never an explanation to them. It was just that he, no, I can't, and I was like, we don't know if they explained it, he in real life or whatever, but in the movie, there was never an explanation. It was just like, can't you expand on this a little bit more? Maybe, a little bit more explanation and get few more people to understand what's going on, but they didn't offer that in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lisa, I think that's part of my concern about the one-dimensionality of this. The script itself often didn't allow them to dig into their characters the way it should.
Yeah, I would agree, because we don't know a lot of the background stories for, I mean, I can't remember half of the characters' names that he went to basic with, but you know, maybe there was a shared story or a shared similarity, but they just all ganged up on him right away.
Well, it's hard to imagine that in a group like that, that's so tightly bound together, whether they want to be or not, that somehow you aren't learning something about the other people you're serving with at a deeper level than you get out of this movie. I might add that again, on the Blu-ray disc, one of the people who was interviewed was actually Desmond's son, Desmond Doss Jr. And it was interesting because he repeatedly came back to this notion that as he was watching the movie, he really felt like he was watching his mother and father. So apparently that portrayal rang pretty true to the son, which I thought was kind of interesting, because it kind of made me wonder how much, because I thought they were kind of, in a sense, one-dimensional. Although Desmond himself in the movie is you get a deeper sense of him. I wondered how much how deeply the son knew about the parents.
Mm.
Chris, I don't know how to say this without, I feel mean saying it. So that one-dimensional, the Doss guy, he seemed Gomer Pyle-ish to me, but he could read and everything, but he had a simpleness to him. And then at the end, when they showed the real guy, he too had a simpleness to him, I thought. So, maybe they just were not really complex people, but they, were very set in their convictions and very, determined with what they are. But when I saw the real life Desmond at the end, it helped me connect a little bit, because I didn't care for that character. It felt, like you said, one-dimensional and just kind of, but I don't know how to say it. I feel it sounds harsh to say somebody is simple, but they seemed very, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean, because that was addressed in the Blu-ray extra, where I think one of the directors or one of the screenwriters also said that simple was not really the right word. That what they really were was uncomplicated. Mm-hmm. Which to me, I thought that was a better way of phrasing it. They weren't living complicated lives. They had some basic ideas, they had some basic principles, they had some basic decencies about them, but they weren't going out into the world and trying to, engage in sophisticated educational experiences and stuff like that. They had lives that they liked, and it wasn't something that we would necessarily recognize, but for them, it was uncomplicated. They went through life, and again, the descriptions of him by his son were basically the same. That it was interesting, because some of the background on this was after the war, and his heroics were recognized even before he got the Medal of Honor. His heroics were recognized. Hollywood came and tried to buy his rights, and he refused to sell them. And it took years and years, and it wasn't until he was getting into the late stages of his life, around 2000, I think it was, that his friends came to him and implored him and said, your story has to live beyond you. And it was only at that point that he started to consider agreeing to have a film made and so on. But in doing that, the way he did it reflected his personality. He went to the Seventh-day Adventist church, to the elders, and asked them to set up a committee to negotiate these things and make sure that the story was being told accurately. And he wasn't looking for anything out of it for himself. So it goes back to the whole point, you know. It wasn't so that he was simple; he was just uncomplicated, and he didn't want to complicate his life or the lives of others around him. And he didn't see any. He apparently was really what he seemed to be throughout his life. He was very humble, very modest, and that I thought creating this committee to do all this on his behalf was kind of telling in terms of his character.
Oh, that was interesting.
We might talk about this at the end, but it connects with that where at the end of the movie, where the real Desmond says, I just went for one. And then I said, okay, let me go for one more. Let me go for one more. And that's what what I meant by simple. He didn't look at everything and say, well, if I go in there, or if I do this, or how is this? He just had a goal, and I just go do this. And once that's done, I do this. And so, and that's, I think, kind of his personality as I got from the movie and the ending.
Yeah, he wasn't trying to calculate quadratic equations. He was just trying to do simple math. One more.
Yeah,
until it adds up to 75.
Like, we're always the ones asking, you know, why do this? Why this, why that? And he's always well, why not?
Yeah.
All good points there. Let's move on to the battle then at Okinawa. The first one on that section, at what point does Desmond earn the respect and trust of his company?
I think it's not really until the point when he starts lowering people down, like almost toward the end of the movie, when, you know, they see people coming down and they realize it's only just Desmond that's doing it. And you kind of see that as well when he gets rescued from the hill and they, you know, all kind of watch him walk down, all just emotionally triggered and everything. And so they're all lined up, just like saying, you know, everything's okay. And so I think at that point is when he finally got the respect, and especially when he lowers Vince Vaughn's character at the very end with the trick that Vince Vaughn chastised him for, you know, working at the end of the movie.
Yeah, I forget who it's been attributed to. I think Anton Chekhov maybe was attributed that in terms of movie making or theater, actually, if you see a gun in the first scene, you need to fire it by the third scene. Otherwise, it serves no purpose. And when I saw in that scene where in basic training where he does that thing with the rope, I figured that's the gun. That's the thing that's going to show up later in the movie that's going to be so critical. So I was kind of amused and pleased to see that see it work out that way.
I would almost argue that he earns the trust of each person at different points, right? Obviously, Vince Vaughn's kind of the last, which is a little ironic, like you said, because he beat him up so much during training camp.
I thought there was a hint of that actually in training camp after he gets the crap beat out of him, and then he doesn't tattle, basically. And you can see that you can see this sort of shift in the way they're looking at him in the barracks when he does that. So I think that it made it easier for them to recognize that actually in the battle.
Yeah, and to go to Molly's point again, when when he's doing like different things, like burying the one guy in the dirt, and then coming back for him later. So it's like little things like that is when like each person, okay, at that point, that person got or gave him the respect that he deserves, and then like this person does at a certain point. So it's kind of like it's almost, you know, individually for most of the battle, and then toward the end is when they all collectively show him the respect.
I thought that, yeah, I thought that scene too, where he buries the soldier and then pulls the other soldier on top of him.
Yeah.
Was also showed his real intelligence, his ability to think very quickly literally in the heat of battle. But he wasn't as simple, uncomplicated, but he wasn't.
I was gonna say that was uncomplicated of it. I mean, yeah, even when he has to go in the bunker and he's, you know, I would get lost and like he just, I mean, it might have been a little over exaggerated, but I'm sure like he just lucked out on that. But okay, so when Desmond and Smitty are watching guard, Smitty asked Desmond why he didn't kill his father, and Desmond said in his heart he did. What did he mean by that?
I think he had every intention to do so. And then in the heat of the moment is when he withdrew. So in his heart, like he went in knowing he was going to kill his father. But then when it got to that point and he's getting ready to pull the trigger, is when he pulls back and realizes this is not the right thing to do. So in his heart, like his father, he killed his father, but then in reality, it didn't happen. And at first I thought like it might have meant his father's dead to him in a way, but then later on when like his father comes in to save him during the trial and everything, I think that's when he kind of forgives him for everything that he experienced.
And I took it a little bit different from that, because I took it as the father that he knew that was very abusive is now dead, because that was when we actually saw Hugo Weaving's character really break down and kind of have a little bit of a turn for the better at that point of this of the movie. So, you know, it's kind of my dad that I knew is now dead and now he's reborn, is how I kind of took it.
Which would be very consistent in a sense with the whole theme of faith that runs through the movie.
Right. Yeah, I almost thought, yeah, he killed a different version of his dad, like you say. I agree. Lisa mentioned this earlier, but what keeps Desmond motivated to keep going back and helping the wounded over and over again?
I think it's because, you know, he knows that it's the right thing to do. And with him saying, help me get one more, Lord, please help me get one more. I think with his connection to his faith in God and just, you know, with him in his mind being guided to do that, you know, he's going every single moment in order to get one more. And so that's what keeps him motivated, is just, you know, he's going in to save the people and he's going in to get as many people as he can during that moment.
Well, from the beginning, he wanted to be the medic and save people. I mean, he kept repeating that throughout, and that was a strong sense of duty for him. And so, you know, he wanted to carry that through. That was what he was there for. The other people were there doing their jobs, and he was there to help people and help save people, and he was going to stick to it.
And I think it seems to me the faith gave him his strength, and his sense of duty gave him his motivation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think combined with the adrenaline, like you just have to keep going, I suppose. Like, I think yeah, I think Chris mentioned earlier, he saved 75 men in like a span of 12 hours. That's incredible.
I don't know how you manage the strength to drag that many bodies across that distance repeatedly. I mean, that was the thing that really struck me, how he kept going with that.
Right. Yeah. And then once you got the edge, you have to rope them down. And oh my, yeah.
What I didn't understand was why, and this has nothing to do with Desmond or any of the characters in the movie, but why the Japanese, when they had control of the ridge, didn't just chop down the ropes that they were using to climb.
Or even fire from the top.
Pardon?
Or even like fire from the top. Just,
Yeah.
I don't know.
That point where the Japanese were, they hadn't reached to that side of the ridge yet until more towards like the end, where we actually saw, you know, when Desmond was coming down and they were there shooting, it was when they actually started to get closer and closer and closer.
Okay. So we might have held them off long enough.
Well, I was thinking even before they made that advance up the because earlier in the movie we see all the troops coming back saying they drove us off the ridge basically. So the Japanese would have had, it seems to me, control of the ridge at that point, and why they didn't knock them down at that point before Desmond's group came back and made their assault. That was the thing that kind of puzzled me. But and there was probably a reason for it, but I didn't think the movie really, helped explain that.
Mm-hmm. Just taking a look at the time here. Let's talk a little bit about the filmmaking then. Did anyone think the war violence was over the top? Or do you think it was pretty accurate?
I thought it was probably pretty accurate, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, Okinawa was, as they say, probably the bloodiest war, battle in the war. Basically, Okinawa and Iwo Jima provided the Japanese with a huge incentive to fight that ferociously, because both of them were considered part of the Japanese homeland. So when the Allied troops showed up, when the American troops showed up there, it was like they had invaded Japan itself. And so there was just as if at this point somebody tried to invade Alaska, we'd probably respond with that kind of ferocity. I think without question that it would have been as bloody and as horrific as the film kind of portrayed. Kind of reminded me of the early scenes in Saving Private Ryan.
It's the same thing too. I remember watching this in theater, and because the first hour there's really no battle, and then all of a sudden it gets to the scene in Okinawa, and then all of a sudden it just gave me that instant Saving Private Ryan feel, because it's one, unexpected, and two, it's like super graphic. And I know this is a Mel Gibson film, and Mel Gibson already has that trademark of being graphic, but at the same time, like, it's just, you don't expect it because of the first hour being more like the background and the court scene and everything.
So I thought the degree of it was, probably pretty accurate. Is that stuff that fire that they spray, is that napalm?
It's a form of it's a form of napalm.
It's a form of napalm.
I think, yeah.
I thought that was pretty. Thought that the violence of it was pretty accurate. Chris knows that, like, I'm like really, if something's a little hokey, it bothers me. And there was a lot of people like, it felt like they were doing gymnastics, like flying through the air and flipping over, and sometimes it didn't feel realistic to me the way that they did it, but that's just me.
I think
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, I sort of felt the same way in some of those scenes where the explosions were going off and whole bodies were flying instead of parts of bodies. That's what I kind of would have expected from that. So, and there were some scenes where the soldiers were, after they'd been hit with a flamethrower, didn't quite look like they were actually. It looked like there was an aura around them instead of them actually burning the way you'd expect. What I was surprised by was how many extras they must have had for that thing, for some of those scenes, and how do you choreograph that many extras with all the explosions and everything that were going on. I know that, again, on the Blu-ray they kind of explained some of that, but even so, even with that explanation, that was one of the things that amazed me about the movie making was how they could choreograph those battle scenes.
Mm.
You might have a question on this, but I don't know, so I'm gonna say it because it's getting near when the Japanese man stuck himself with the knife,
Mm.
and just killing himself. I thought that was enough. I didn't need to see the decapitation. I thought that was a little over the top. Maybe that's really what happened historically.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I was just like,
That's how it works. You go from one end, you have to basically rip out your innards and you kind of drag it. And to ensure that you are dead, somebody has to chop it off your head.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, because I was hoping that there was some historical accuracy to it, and it wasn't just put in there to spoof things up a little bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was gonna say I would agree on that part where Desmond steps on the grenade and it's very slow motion, right? And like, I think that did happen. I think he was worried, like no one's gonna believe that. But I think
on the Harry Carey scene, the thing that I was wondering about was, at that point, it seemed to me the Japanese were still winning, and so why the commander would have killed himself while they were before defeat was a thing that kind of puzzled me. Again, that's not really explained. That just left a big question mark in my mind about why that scene was even in there actually.
mm-hmm. Let's see. Oh, the question about
the other thing I wanted to,
yeah.
The thing about Desmond going down into the tunnels, I thought was, to me, was important because it kind of indicated why the bombardment by the American artillery, by the battleships, didn't really have an effect because everybody was underground, and that was a really extensive tunnel system. I know I know in the book Flags of Our Fathers, about the Iwo Jima conflict battle, they talked about how they knew that there were tunnels, but they didn't know how extensive they were and how many troops they were hiding. And that scene where Desmond goes down and winds up in the tunnel, and he's wandering around, you get a sense of how extensive it was, and then you start. To me, it made me realize why all that horrific bombardment really didn't stop anything in terms of the Japanese troops being able to mount that huge offensive there.
Right, yeah, and they had the ships to like soften the blow. We just see them firing, like you don't, and then all of a sudden all these Japanese people come toward them. You're like, okay, that makes sense. They're all underground. Like,
almost like ants coming out.
Yeah. Was it realistic in terms of they shot in Australia, which is interesting, but I thought it seemed believable. What did everyone else think?
Yeah, they shot it on a they were shooting it on a farm. They had about 175 acre area that they basically dug up and created that whole scenario. There's a scene in these extras in this making of part film where they show the scene where they show where it all is, but it's from a high angle, so you can see what's beyond the set. And beyond the set, it's like green fields and there are cars driving along the highway and all kinds of stuff. You'd have no idea from the way they were able to film that basically there was calm civilization beyond it.
Yeah, the set designer and the cinematographer did a good job there. And it's more close up too. We never got wide shots.
Right.
For that reason. That makes sense. But
Where was Desmond from in the US?
Lynchburg, Virginia.
Oh, Virginia. See, I thought that some of the scenes, like when he was taking his girlfriend up through that waterfall and stuff, I thought it looked a little bit tropical for somewhere.
Well, yeah, I think some of that was in West Virginia. So a little bit of the US then.
One of the producers mentioned, because they did shoot all this stuff, the Lynchburg hospital scene, for instance, was actually shot in Australia. They found a building that looked very much like the actual Lynchburg hospital, so they decorated it up. And when they went and showed the film in Lynchburg, some residents came up and say, "How did you do this without us seeing you there?" And at that point, the producer said, "Yes, we managed to do it."
That is neat. Before we get to the last question, I do want to share a picture of the real Desmond Dawes on top of Hacksaw Ridge. Really quickly. There we go. So I just want to, our director passed this along to me. So Desmond is at the top there, which is interesting because that's what Hacksaw Ridge would have looked like. And then on the right, that's just a map of Okinawa, and the ridge was in the red circle there.
That's cool.
Wow, a little bit rougher looking than the cliff in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, Okinawa is bigger than I had kind of imagined.
Yeah.
When you look at the scale at the bottom.
Right, and it's pretty skinny. Yeah. And apparently there were thousands of civilians living there already. And some obviously didn't make it. But I thought that was interesting because without knowing the background, which is watching the movie, you would be like, oh, it's just a deserted island. But okay. And then the last question, as per usual, who is your favorite actor? And why?
I'll go. I don't know his name, but he was the one who smacked him in the he was the tough guy.
Smitty?
What is his name?
Oh, his character name is Smitty. Yeah.
Smitty. Yeah. I liked him because I thought he had a veneer of toughness, but he seemed to have a lot of perspective and thought and inside, and he actually you saw that come out a little bit at a time, even when they were beating him up, and then he said something, and so he was my favorite character. Besides, he's nice looking.
So Smitty was played by an actor named Luke Bracey. Yeah, I'm not sure what else he's been in, but I think it's, for me, it's a little hard to really say who my favorite was. I know for like some people, seeing Vince Vaughn go from doing so much comedy for 15 or so years to doing this movie was a shock. But then again, like he also had kind of some dramatic turns before he did his comedies. Granted, they weren't great movies, but so for him to kind of go toward a dramatic role was interesting. I do think so I think it was Lisa that mentioned that Desmond was kind of like the Gomer Pyle in this, and I think that Vince Vaughn's character is like the R. Lee Ermey, the drill sergeant, and he kind of gives that that aura of being just like almost kind of trying to emulate R. Lee Ermey in a sense. But I thought it was nice to see him kind of take on something different and show he has more range than just being a comedic actor and only doing like Wedding Crashers or something.
I didn't really have I don't think favorite is the right word for me. It was kind of strange to see Spider-Man as you know, as a war hero, but but the character that I kind of had, I liked Hugo Weaving. I like Hugo Weaving as an actor in general. I mean, think of him in The Matrix and that kind of thing, some of the roles he's had. But I think it was that he was kind of pivotal to who Desmond Doss became. And I thought Weaving did a nice job of portraying the father in a way that made it believable that Doss could turn out the way he did. So I would have to say that I thought Hugo Weaving was the one that worked well for me.
And I think, yeah, for him to go from being like almost anti-hero or more sinister characters, like in The Matrix or even V for Vendetta, was a nice turn as well to seeing someone who is, you know, has so much anger and rage built up, and then kind of turning not toward the end, but like in the middle of the movie when he sees what his son is doing. So it was actually a really nice dramatic turn for Hugo Weaving, and interesting to see him kind of take on this type of role.
I liked Dorothy because I liked her strength that she had and her belief in Desmond, especially during the wedding in the chapel and I don't know what priest or pastor, you know, asked, do you want to continue? I'm really sorry. She's like, he won't, this isn't him. He wouldn't do this. And, you know, her belief in him really held that together for both of them.
Yeah, I would say I liked Dorothy too. Kind of the love story mix in there, right? Give her your Bible and always something to remind him that she's back home, that she's thinking about him, wants him safe. So
I thought it was kind of interesting too that speaking of the Bible, that it survived throughout that whole thing.
Yeah.
Even in the battlefield, when he lost it, it came back and it was still in more or less pristine condition.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that might have been something symbolic about that whole thing.
I don't remember, did he actually, like, did they find it in real life? I don't know if he ever.
I'm not sure. I know that this was actually based on, there's a documentary called The Conscientious Objector, which I haven't seen yet, but I'm kind of curious if it does explain that, where like he loses the Bible, but then it gets found, or if that was just more for like the theatrics of the movie and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that one up. But yeah, so the real Desmond never got to see his story on the big screen. That's kind of sad. His brother Harold did survive the war. We kind of stopped hearing about his story.
That's the one thing that, like, even though I think this was like what, our third time seeing the movie, like I completely forgot about the fact that Harold just disappears from the movie, and then we don't hear about him until the after credits or the credit scene when it shows his archival interview footage.
I think right after that dinner where, he was telling his parents, I'm going off. I had asked David, I was like, did we ever, I don't remember the ending. Did he survive?
Right.
They never mentioned it at the end until you go all the way to the end and he's, there telling, what went on, and it's like, oh, okay, so I guess he did survive.
Yeah. All
If you
right.
get a chance- if you get a chance to see the Blu-ray, that making of feature, it's really worthwhile, because they walk through basically the thinking, the way, what they put together and why they put it together the way they did.
Okay.
I found it really useful in terms of understanding the context for the movie.
And also that committee you mentioned, Chris, approved it. So right. Script to the
I guess, yeah. Or at least they negotiated it.
yeah, something. And
Apparently it took them about 15 years to get that thing onto the screen, so.
wow. That's impressive, but a great story nonetheless. Any other last thoughts?
Thank you for the pictures again, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those are good.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to put it together.
Thank you, Molly, for hosting.
You're welcome. So thank you all for joining. And let me
David, Selena, good to see you.
See you guys.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've done this. I think we only did it like twice,
Twice.
and then had a lot of things come up, and then I saw this
I
come
got
up.
married.
Yeah, so
congrats.
Yeah.
Wow. Wonderful.
Thank you. Next month is Tigerland, is that right?
Yep, the 2000 film.
I haven't seen that since it came out. It's been a
I
while.
don't think I've ever watched it.
I think it's Colin Farrell's first movie, if I remember correctly.
Really?
Yeah. So yeah.
Do you have it?
No, I don't.
All right, well, we'll look forward to that, and any of our other virtual events can be found on our website, wizfestmuseum.com. And with that, I hope everyone has a great night, and thank you for joining me.
All right.